We want to welcome to our studios here at Calabash TV, Dr. Claudius Preville, a good friend of ours. He's also the managing director of Preville and Associates Consulting Group. He's an economist, political strategist,
yes.
And he was in the news fairly recently as well. So, Claudius, we have quite a bit to cover. Welcome to Calabash TV.
Thank you so much, Bernard. How are you?
I'm pretty good, pretty good. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you again. Yes.
As somebody who came in and for the last two political cycles, two election cycles, you've been either involved on the fringes or observing quite keenly what has been going on. This election was billed by both political leaders as the most consequential. Were they fear-mongering, or was it actually the most consequential election in our history as an independent state?
Well, apparently it borders on being the most consequential because I think both parties saw a number of things going on in the country that they were not happy with. On the one hand, I mean, the incumbents at the time saw themselves as doing a great job. They were focused on doing infrastructure type work. But I think at the same time, on the other side, one noticed that the masses were complaining. A number of their requirements were not being met. There's also the question of the way the governance style that Mr. Chastanet brought to St. Lucia. That is unprecedented. That was never seen before. And to a greater extent, based on the anecdotes throughout St. Lucia, it was highly unpopular. And I think as a result, it was not surprising, certainly to me, that this type of management of a country would have been denounced at the polls. Right? So the resounding defeat that was dealt to the party at the polls is for me not a surprise at all.
But it's a case where solutions probably didn't understand, because we know we've always complained about having an implementation deficit in St. Lucia. We don't follow up with things. Government takes a long time. Things are pretty slow. It can be frustrating getting things going. So Mr. Chastanet's style of being a more pragmatic person, he wants to get this done at all costs, that we didn't quite get used to that kind of approach.
I don't know how to say this, but I think Mr. Chastanet spent an entire 5 years of sending the wrong messages to the people of St. Lucia. Right? Maybe he meant well, but somehow, if he did mean well, his communication skills are very poor because his message was not coming across. It didn't come across to me.
But they were very visible.
They were very visible. So what was coming across seemed to have been an attack on St. Lucian rights, on St. Lucian liberties, on St. Lucian things that are St. Lucian. I mean, when you start with even something like the National Trust, what is the National Trust's purpose? Is to preserve our heritage, our ancestry, everything that is really St. Lucian. That's what the National Trust is there for. And so when a leader comes and says he will defund the trust, right, which he did, it really raises very, very thorny questions to me. Why do you intend by this to destroy everything that is about St. Lucia? That's a very scary thing to do. Right, so Compton instituted the trust, as you know, and he would have never thought of doing something like this. Kenny Anthony came, he never did anything like this. So defunding the trust, I think, was a very unpopular thing. And then that was just the beginning of it. Then you had all the other things that came. The most recent one is the pitons, construction in the base of the pitons. I mean, really, who's doing that? Who's going to approve this? No one is going to approve of doing something like this, because you actually will compromise the chances of our heritage status being lost. You have the DSH. It came initially, big bang, it's a great idea, it's going to bring in billions of US dollars to the economy. Theoretically, if that worked, it may have brought in some of what we call the trappings, the symbols of development, condominiums and, flashy lights and so on. But that would be at a cost as well. So I think while some St. Lucians may have embraced it, and maybe if it actually did materialize, it may have been something good for St. Lucia, nevertheless, it would have left some people behind. It would have come at the expense of our own culture and heritage and so on. So I think one noticed that Allen Chastanet was perhaps pursuing a kind of development model, but at the expense of the people of St. Lucia, and at the expense of even the danger, the risk of creating a society where you have too many different, more classes, right? Further segmentation of the society, as you know it. And so I think these are the things that really present a big problem for him in his tenure of governance.
Was that a model that was dated as well? Because I know there was a constant reference to Sir John having to do certain things, take certain actions, in spite of the fact that there was heavy opposition to it and so on. But he persisted and so on, and the country saw the benefits like the Rodney Bay and so on. So was it a case where that strategy was for that particular time, but Mr. Chastanet's approach was kind of dated and that kind of affected him?
Maybe to a small extent, yes, but I would beg to differ. John Compton was not just a stubborn individual who did what he wanted to do. Far from this, John Compton consulted extensively before he did anything. He had some great ideas, but it was not as a matter of just saying, well, he would just get up in the morning and start doing something without consulting anybody. He consulted. There were occasions, yes, one or two occasions when he did certain things that I have to say, with the benefit of hindsight, we see that we give him the credit for having done the right thing. You think about Rodney Bay, that was just a total water swamp and mash, 30 years ago. And he basically built that. Today we have the marina, we have all the developments. Everybody, I think, feels it's a step forward for St. Lucia. The joining of the causeway to Pigeon Island, I think, of course, we know all the controversy that went with that back in the 1980s, 90s, when the idea came. But today, I think most of us, appreciate it. Because I think at the end of the day, even if Sir John did those things, I gave him the credit that he had a vision that probably most of the rest of us was behind at the time when those ideas were being articulated. And that happens in leadership sometimes. But I think with Allen Chastanet, there was a stronger air of authoritarianism. There was also the general notion that, look, we don't have much time or regard for technical knowledge. John Compton used the public service extensively. He respected public service officials, right? You would never hear him outsourcing his budget to Ernst & Young or some company out there, which was absolutely unnecessary, right? You have Allen Chastanet, he came in, did exactly that. And Ernst & Young, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it was more value subtracted than value added. What did they add? What did they really add to our budget? They came in, they spent a lot of time picking the brains of our public servants, learning a lot about our inner workings of government, which probably should be our own confidential information. And in the end, they just produced a report, which was something that any of the ministries could have done with the permanent secretaries. So I think one gets the feeling that there was a general disrespect for our own professionals in this country, within the public service, the civil service, where you already have the staff, even the consultants and other experts in the country. There was a general disrespect. And if he consulted anyone, it would seem to be those from the outside who had to offer some ideas that he felt was more coveted, more useful. But that again too left the people out of the development agenda. And I think he paid the price for this kind of decision making. John Compton was very much unlike him in this manner.
Yes. It's obvious that the thinking was that, you have all that infrastructure and you have so much stuff going on. There's development going on that would have secured Mr. Chastanet another term, a second term as Prime Minister. But obviously, and although the work was happening around the country, but that still didn't impact the voters' decision. They still came out and overwhelmingly voted him out. So that means that era of selling infrastructure as a key selling point for re-election doesn't exist anymore. I
think there's still room for infrastructure, and I think
we're not leaving it out completely, but
alone you can't win on that.
We need infrastructure,
I think you really have to. Society's become much more people-centered and people-oriented, and especially on the backs of a COVID-19 pandemic, which decimated our economy, and that has to be said. You can't then just put all your focus on the infrastructure. And I think this is the problem he also faced. The first thing is that, in retrospect, looking at what transpired with DSH, I think most St. Lucians will say to you today that DSH was almost like a scam. You know what I mean? From the hope of how many billion? 2-3 billion US dollars we were supposed to be getting out of it. In the end, it was a racetrack for horse racing, which is a sport of the kings. I mean, really and truly, it was never meant to be something that St. Lucians, the ordinary St. Lucians, would feel a part of. So infrastructure, not much happened from 2016 until 2019. It's only around 2019 I saw a little bit of construction work starting, road construction works into 2020, and of course he had COVID. So whatever he did in infrastructure came very late in the day. At the same time, he did not come across as a caring prime minister, right? I think St. Lucians couldn't feel his heart. He didn't show empathy for the people of this country. When with the COVID scenario, the IMF, which for the greater part is not a very compassionate institution, if I may say so, but the IMF sent us 29 million US dollars, which was meant primarily to provide, to shore up the economy, to help people, transfers, build, the small businesses, etc. That money was not used for that purpose. It was not used for that purpose. And so people were hearing the reports in other islands where the same kinds of funds were sent and the citizens were were receiving the benefits. Not in St. Lucia. You have the CIP funds, right? Our passports being sold outsourced for sale to people in China, and the funds, the proceeds from the sale of those passports, not coming directly to our coffers in St. Lucia. We have no idea where the monies are being held. That was not, looked upon in a very fair way. And when you look across the road next door in Dominica, and you hear all the great things that Roosevelt's Carrot is doing and has done and continues to do with the sale of passport monies, building hospitals, building homes for the people who lost their homes after Hurricane Maria, and a whole lot of things, COVID relief and so on. And what has been done in St. Lucia? Nothing. So I think, all in all, my own assessment, the government did not show compassion. There may have been a few within his new model of the new St. Lucia. There may have been a few people who were benefiting from his government projects. These were clearly not in the majority. Maybe, 1,000 of them were benefiting from what was going on there, but the majority were not benefiting. So it was growth that did not include, most St. Lucians. And I think the votes reflected that. He paid the price for that.
Now, before we started, we were having a discussion, and we're moving along because of time constraints as well, in terms of I said it for elections. And as we were talking about Mr. Chastanet, I heard a pollster say that had he called the elections in September last year, he could have won. And that means a continuation of the policy, the very same thing we're discussing.
Yes.
Talk to us about that, and how critical is it now that Mr. Pear, who now has a solid two-thirds majority, at least one of the first things, and I think that's a pretty low-hanging fruit, that he sets a date for elections in 2026.
I think, here's the thing. First of all, the pollster, sometimes I said, John will talk about greasy polls, that pollster particularly was a bit greasy. I heard his predictions. I noted in particular what he said about Stevenson King having no chance of winning in the Castries North, and I frowned. I was like, really? This guy has no clue of what St. Lucia is like. Or maybe he was paid to say that. I don't know. Someone paid him to say that. But clearly he had it completely wrong where that was concerned. And both King and Frederick emerged, triumphantly at the polls. He was also telling us that UWP was going to win the elections, a massive mandate overall. Again, that was totally off the cards. And anyone who had been keeping their ears to the ground in St. Lucia, anybody who was connected to the ordinary St. Lucians, I will say, knew what the thinking was. And that thinking was not to return Chastanet's regime to power. It was really to remove the government from office. Now, as for a fixed date for elections, I fully agree. I think there should be a fixed date. There should be a fixed date because it will help both the government itself of the day and the opposition keep themselves on their toes, and it's going to be fair to the electorate. We also have a number of people who reside in overseas. We have the diaspora. And if there is a fixed date for elections, these people will plan in advance. They could book their flights without any suasion on either side to come and vote and exercise their franchise. So I think it's a good thing, a healthy thing to have a fixed date for elections. In that way, we'll have a higher degree of accountability by the incumbent. And also the opposition will not be disadvantaged when elections are called. Everyone can say, you know the date was so-and-so date, you could start planning from today, essentially, to deliver when the time comes.
But is that a tough thing for Mr. Pierre to deliver at least one of the, that came up in the constitutional reform that we had a couple of years ago. Is that a set date easy for him, or is he likely to face some kind of a hurdle, stumbling block somewhere?
Of course, you know our society. Set date for election, I don't think it exists in any of the CARICOM countries.
But we can set the trend.
Of course, Senator could set a precedent, of course. But yes, it doesn't exist yet. And
because politicians like that, having that tool.
The incumbent, the incumbent obviously benefits. If you're in power and you know you could read the lines and see what's going wrong for you, what's going right, and you know it's the right time to call the election, then of course you do it. But yeah, I think it's something that now both administrations have said that they want to do. Chastanet said he would have done it. He never did it. I think it would be a good thing now with a 2/3 majority for the administration to consider is fixing a date for elections. Because I think that would help the administration itself in terms of its own delivery. When you're an incumbent and elections are called, you're running on your record, right? You're running on your record. You're not running so much on your manifesto of the future. Because people are coming to judge you. They're not coming to judge the opposition. They're coming to judge you because you're the one performing for the last 5 years. And I think that's where the administration failed. Allen Chastanet's administration failed in the last election because the record didn't show much. I mean, education. Take education, for example. We had those controversial decisions over the laptops. The laptops that had been secured through, I think it was the Venezuelans, right? So whether it was the Venezuelans or the Cubans or anybody else who secured the laptops, the truth of the matter is that it was something good for the children of St. Lucia, the future of St. Lucia. I can't fathom why one would have removed that without a plan to put something better. If you had a plan to put something better, yes. But clearly there was no plan to put something superior to that, and we just got rid of it.
With the books in them.
Well, they came with the e-book story after a long time after, and sadly, I mean, the truth of the matter is, Bernard, it's only after COVID hit us very hard, and we were all forced to do distributed learning or learn from home kind of thing, teach from home, etc. That's when the laptop thing showed its ugly head, because if the school system had laptops then, there would be no problem. Right. And, you know, the public school system suffered heavily in the COVID year. And I think one even notices a slight decline in common entrance results among other areas. I'm not sure about CXCs yet. That's still been done. But at least common entrance results shows that there was a decline in performance nationally.
But the point there too, sorry, is that for example, the Labour Party should have given that a little more thought as well, as opposed to just giving laptops without textbooks and so on. That process could have been thought through a little more, so you don't just get an empty laptop.
Well, of course. I mean, I agree. I mean, one could argue that you could have had a stronger, a much more comprehensive tool before the kids. But that you had a starting point. You had a foundation, and I mean, you kill it, and you had nothing to put in place. I mean, I hate to say this, but sadly, the former administration's overall attitude towards education and the educated, I find it very, very wanting, very wanting. I mean, you only have to look around and see the kind of people who were in the platforms and the campaigns, who were the ones actually advising Chastanet's administration. I don't think they showed much appreciation for education. And I recall in 2006, when Sir John returned to office, one of the things he placed high on the agenda was St. Lucia having a university campus. That's been on the agenda for quite a while. But I can remember distinctly back in 2006. And there are all kinds of shenanigans, over the last decade and a half or so. But at the end of the day, we now find ourselves in a situation where the university, the fourth campus, has gone to Antigua. And there's no reason why we couldn't have had that fourth campus. I think if the administration placed a greater greater value on education for the nation as a whole, we would have had that fourth campus at the University of the West Indies. All right, so I think they lost a lot of marks in that area. Healthcare, talking about low-hanging fruits, the OKEU hospital was ready to be utilized, certainly within a maximum of 12 months upon entry into office. It was not done. Again, we had all those shenanigans. We hear about the Health City Cayman coming down, negotiating whatever, I don't know what. But all it required was commissioning, and it could have been utilized, right? After 4 years, it was not commissioned. Why? Why? There were no major capital expenses to get to that point of utilizing the hospital. It was a simple matter of, getting it commissioned, getting someone who could run it properly for you, and the people would have it. We actually got to a point where the European Commissioner, the European Ambassador in Barbados, who was also our ambassador for the OECS, came to St. Lucia and had to rebuke the Prime Minister, the administration, over what? The way they intend to utilize the hospital. So, healthcare, they send the wrong message, okay? Finance, especially public finance. You expect an administration to handle your finances with a lot of prudence. That's what we have known. The John Compton era was very solid for this, very, very well known for this. You don't engage in reckless expenditure of finances. The Minister of Finance is the man or woman with the power, as per our Constitution, to enter any kind of negotiation on financial matters for the country. We hear about the PAJOA letters. Somebody is writing, on behalf of PAJOA to bind the country for 60-something million US dollars in some projects. What is the meaning of this? This kind of thing could have never, ever happened on the John Compton. Impossible, right? So there was a perception that financial mismanagement was going on. And on top of that, the leadership would not turn around and say to those who were committing the misdemeanors, I'll censure you, or I'll fire you, In Compton's time, the story, how that happened. If I may draw upon Mr. Faustin, I hope I'm not causing any distress by saying that, but in Compton's time, when he got involved in some kind of corruption in the government, the next day he was out. He was fired, So Sir John showed no, when it came to the public finances, he was very clear what his priorities were. Right? So we didn't see that with Chastanet. With Chastanet, it's like anything goes, And who was the Prime Minister in the end, really? Who was in charge? We get the feeling that some other people had more power than him. You understand? So that did not augur very well for the party.
The party itself appears to be at a crossroads right now. And you mentioned Sir John a few times. Ever since Sir John's left, there's been a constant search for leadership. I think you've been involved in some of that as well. And Mr. Chastanet was given a chance, and he has not had the returns that he was expecting, and obviously the party will be disappointed in the returns. Is there a selling point that he can use now to still retain his hold on the party, or you see that hold has been loosened and there's a void right now?
Honestly, I think the party has some serious introspection to undertake. Right? I think it's at a crossroads. I do not see it as being prepared to govern in the near future. I found a very distressing thing during the campaigns was the extent to which racism, you could call it colorism, whatever you want, but I found it was very distressing, the extent to which that was utilized on their platforms. And to this very day, you could find content on Facebook, etc., where people are actually saying very overtly that you need to be a man of a certain skin color to govern this country. I find that so pathetic. And the party seem to have subscribed to this dogma to the extent that its campaign personnel have been using it, and there's no one has rebuked that. Not the leader, not the chairman, no one. And personally, I would not want to be affiliated with a party with a formal, position that you have to be a white man or you have to be someone of some Kool-Aid YII, to be the parents of this country. And I think the people are very, feel exonerated to see a man of their own skin pigmentation being, inaugurated as prime minister in this country just before Emancipation Day. But it's very worrying for me when in a small economy like ours, a small society like ours, the bulk of whom come from, the conflicts of race and slavery and so on, to find our own people pushing these narratives as a campaign narrative is sickening. I mean, on top of that, you have people like Fortuna Belrose pushing again her own narrative, openly condoning discrimination and victimization. I mean, the party has lost its way. John Compton would have never condoned that kind of behavior. Absolutely not. And that is why you found everybody, aligning themselves with Stevenson King. Whether it was Sir John's wife, the Archbishop himself, everybody. Because, you see, the party itself, I tell people, the party is not just about a symbol and a color. That's an external shell for the party. The party is really about the content, the character of the individuals, what they do, what values they espouse, what do they stand for, okay? And what we are standing for, what the UWP is standing for today, is not what it stood for, back in '64 when the forefathers established it. I think it's going the wrong way, absolute wrong way, and I think it has certainly gone that way with Mr. Chastanet. So Mr. Chastanet must take the credit for where it is at today. And I don't see anybody looking to a party that upholds racism and colorism and all those things that does not place any importance on education and so on. And no one's going to vote for it. So there has to be a serious rethink in that party and what it stands for, because it has lost its way.
So the party is in serious situation now, trying to find a replacement, because since Sir John we've had Dr. Von Royce, we've had Stevenson King, we've had Morella Joseph, we've had Mr. Chastanet. I think I'm missing somebody else, but there've been a succession of one-term or 2-year leaders of the party, and Mr. Chastanet came, he had one term as well, and the returns were not favorable to the party's interests. So does that mean, like you mentioned, it might be difficult for them to get ready to govern in a hurry? But what does the party have to do now? Does it look forward to new people, new blood? Does it look to Mr. King returning to help, at least like he did the last time, salvage whatever he can and get it back on a track?
I think there's a big task ahead. And by the way, I'm preparing my own private account of the reasons why the party lost at the polls in 2021, and that will be available as an ebook. I'm selling this. It's hard work, so you have to pay for it. But I'm doing some work on that. I think we have to share with the public. But the point is that the party has to do a lot of work. It cannot just be going out there looking for a leader. I think it has to go back and look at its identity. Who are you as a party? What are you about? Okay? Are you something that just comes around and looks for votes on election day? Or do you have a bigger purpose, a bigger rationale for existence? Okay? John Compton would say the driving ethos for the UWP was to fight the cause that needs assistance against the wrong that needs resistance. It was very clear what the party was trying to do. So there was always a cause, and sadly, in the last general election, the cause became to get the leader of the UWP and his people out because they had lost their way, okay? So the party has to go back and do some deep soul searching, and it has to also find trust. And frankly, it will not find trust among those who are at its helm right now. When Mr. King walked away, you heard the news about, treason and all of those things. But what did the people of St. Lucia think? I think it's very clear what the people thought. And who did they think was committing the act of treason, if anybody was committing the act of treason? Not Mr. King. It was them, okay? So they have to understand that they've lost their way completely, and there has to be a complete rethink. Central to this, right? Personally, I will say Stephenson King and myself, we were both attacked on racial lines, and that has to change. I don't see anyone crawling back into this party, in the same party that treats you in this derogatory way, that actually has campaigns against you. You know, Guy Joseph, I can call his name very openly. Guy Joseph is very overtly out there promoting this kind of racism in the party, saying that you need someone of white skin to run the party. So, and that is the kind of narrative. How do you just go back into this? You know, you can't, you know. But sadly, that's not what it was ever built as. It was not what Sir John, in spite of the fact that Sir John had a fewish white skin, he never saw himself as a white man running a party. He saw himself as an ordinary St. Lucian, a farmer, the humblest of all the St. Lucian people. And he did not just pretend he was. Right? I happen to have known him a little better than maybe the average St. Lucian. He was genuinely an ordinary person. He never wanted opulence and lots of wealth for himself. He could have had it, but he was not after that. He wanted to live a very simple, modest, ordinary life, like an ordinary farmer, ordinary St. Lucian person, you know, but not what we saw in the last 5 years, where when you have an administration and you have question marks being raised about people appearing to have accumulated wealth, untold quantities of wealth, amounts of wealth in a short time, when we know what your public salaries are. I mean, something is wrong. Recently, we've had, in my view, far too many controversies in the news about land tenure. A government should never find itself in office and to have a situation where people are losing the titles of the lands. This is just crazy. This is scandalous. And we had that happening under the Allen Chastanet administration. So, crime and security, I don't think it's fair ever to label that on any one particular political party. But when you run on a mandate, when you actually say to the people, this guy can't fix crime, I'll do it. And you come in and then it festers, it gets 10 times worse than the previous, then you have a big problem, right? And that happened as well under his watch. So it's a comedy of events. And at the end of the day, if you've gotten it wrong in so many areas, for me, it's not surprising that you can't win the election. You know?
It appears to be dire for the party. You've been involved with the UWP. Are you tempted now to make a return to see if what you can contribute to the resuscitation of the United Workers' Party?
No, I think right now the UWP has to go and examine itself.
Are you willing to play a role in that?
No, that's for them to do. Those who have structured it in the way it has been structured today, and who have caused the like of Chastanet to emerge as Prime Minister and leader, they have to go and rethink that strategy. When they've done their homework, they can come back and talk to other people to build. Because I can't just say I'm going to go and build or Stephenson King. No one can go and just try and reform it. It has to be those on the inside. They have to first see where they've gone fundamentally wrong, that their narrative is wrong, the messaging to St. Lucians is wrong, and you know what they've stood for the last 5 years was wrong, really. They have to look at all of those things, those questions. When they could find answers for that, right, and they're prepared to make the amends. You see, because too often people want to settle these issues by simply saying, let's just forget about it and move on. But unless you learn the lesson, the matter resurfaces, right? So, Stephenson King's Blue Wave, I find it has very strong appeal to the people of this country. And you know why it appeals to the people of this country? Because Stephenson King is authentic, right? I was saying to Andre Paul a few weeks ago, I will bet with him, if you were to do a test, you would do a poll, and ask the people of this country, who do you trust the most as a politician in this country? Steve would easily emerge, if not the number one, certainly among the top a few politicians in this country. The people trust him, right? And that is captured in the vote that he got. Trouncing Janine Girodi 2-1, more than 2-1 at the polls, despite having all the machinery of the party and all all the glam and so on, and the monies to go with it. Janine was trounced more than 2-1. So it says to me that the people believed the message, the authentic message of Stephenson King, and they disbelieved what was being told to them by the UWP establishment.
So are we likely to see that Mr. King now getting a kind of a green light to move ahead with third party, considering the fact that the UWP might be unsalvageable at this point, might be too toxic for him to get into that murky situation?
My understanding is that Mr. King has made it very clear that he wants to move ahead with his own, to expand the blue wave. I think that's a good direction to go. The people should be given alternatives in terms of how they think. And if a party will not learn the lessons from its misdeeds, then sometimes the best thing is to create a new one. In Dominica, you had Eugenia Charles for a greater part of 20 years or so. I don't remember exactly what. She had the Freedom Party. And that party seemed to have died a death shortly after she died, right? Today it's having 1 or 2 seats in the parliament. And the main opposition party is what they call over there the United Workers' Party. So there's nothing to say that if Stephenson King were to start a new movement, which the people have some belief in, that it can't effectively replace the United Workers' Party, So the party has to really understand that you are here to serve people. You're not here to serve yourself, right? You're here to serve the people's interests, and that should come before anything else.
As Mr. Pierre takes over and announces his cabinet and so on, there are a couple of things I want to run through quickly with you in terms of some of the things that faces St. Lucia that it surfaced over the last 2 administrations. One, and I'm doing a campaign called the Independence Project, where I'm looking at what independence was supposed to mean to us and as a St. Lucian people and where we're heading. And one of the things that concerned me was the ease with which prime ministers give away land. We had a situation with the Grindberg and the seabed and other instances where investors get land almost at will, and with the last administration, again you mentioned it as well in terms of the land situation. Should it be that easy for prime ministers to give away land, not our natural resource?
Absolutely not. My own view is that when it comes to our land, the land, listen, in any country that you go to, the land is what the people relate to as defining who they are. Having a small piece of land is a big deal for any citizen in almost anywhere in the world, okay? So I am very concerned about any administration, whatever your color or your stripe, giving away land in the way it was done under the Chastanet administration. The DSH deal, 1,000 acres of land at $1 an acre for 99 years is scandalous, especially when you look right next door. The ordinary St. Lucian can't get 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet to build a little thing upon it and call it my shelter, And by the way, on this matter, Stephenson King has a great thought, and he actually spoke about that thought in one of his campaign meetings, and he said, why not look at the government having acquired some of those crown lands? Why not having government offer long lease arrangements for the ordinary St. Lucians as a way to acquire land? So rather than, right now in St. Lucia, the average person needs about $100,000 or more to acquire 10,000 square feet, okay? To build, or even 5,000 square feet to build. So you did at least maybe $50,000 or $100,000, depending where you're buying the land. So the average person now goes to buy land. It takes he or she 10 years to pay back that piece of land. In the meantime, you have no house, So what Steve was saying, why not, make it possible for the average person to be able to acquire land for a long lease arrangement, say a 40-year lease, 50-year lease arrangement. And that lease, once you have title, you go to the bank could give you a mortgage, you could actually build a house. So it's a way you could actually acquire your shelter, right, in a shorter period of, say, 10, 20 years, than to have to take 30, 40 years to first buy the land at 10, 15 years and then build a house on it, which will take another 10, 15 years to happen. So these are the things we have to start thinking about. If we could give away to the like of DSH and on speculative terms, we should think about our citizens. I have to add also, when it comes to our land, we have to look at not only the short-term effects, but the long-term effects that such deals can have on our society as well as our economy. Cabot Links. The Cabot Links deal, my problem with it is the following. When you sell land at the prices we did to Cabot, and Cabot now essentially speculates, goes to Canada and sells the land at outrageous prices, right? So I think it's like, what, $200 a square foot or something equivalent. If you look at the profit margins that they made on the sale. But what's the price we're going to pay for this? Cabot is then an enclave. So you have this enclave in the north, which will be a place where only those with a lot of money, millions of dollars, will come and buy little settlements and reside. That will put pressure on all the lands in Cap Estate, okay, the north of the island. So in no time, everywhere else, not only the Cabot enclave, but everywhere else, the price of land is going to surge. So we'll have a situation, if we're not careful, whereby no one else will be able to buy land in the north. The price is going to go through the roof. It'll put pressure on prices everywhere else because people have to be drifting from the north and find where they could buy land, because you always want to find land somewhere to buy. So you see the problem. The long-term impact of that policy could be that you create a highly fragmented St. Lucia, where you have a set of foreigners come in and buy out the choicest chunk of St. Lucia. Some local rich people will be coexisting next to them, and another set of people will be existing, in the remnants where nobody else wants to actually live. Is that the St. Lucia we want to create? So you see, you have to be very, very careful when you take a decision like this as government to sell the land of this country to foreigners, right?
More importantly as well, should the NIC have considered those things? And do we need to redefine now how the NIC operates and the relationship that it has with the political directorate?
I have not studied the NIC in great detail.
Because they help finance?
To tell you whether it was right or not. Certainly what I've seen, based on what I've seen in the media, the NIC should not be financing projects of that type. The NIC projects that they should be financing should be primarily government type projects, okay? And its own projects, like NIPRO, government loans to genuine government concerns. These are the things that the NIC was supposed to be putting money into. Luckily for us, on this occasion, Cabot has paid back the loan, right? So there's no question of the money not coming back to the NIC. But the money side of the equation is just one. In this particular case, the bigger issue for me is the long-term structural implication for our society as a people. And the fact that we are now, in the name of what we call development, what we're actually doing, we're creating enclaves. We're creating a cluster for foreigners to come and say they are St. Lucians and they will live and own and the choicest part, and for some other locals who have the money to buy nearby and others to be at, you're the remnants, you're relegated to the bottom of the heap. Is that what we call fairness in distribution of the wealth of our nation, our patrimony? The very patrimony we want to destroy by destroying the National Trust. You see what I'm saying? So I am quite encouraged by Prime Minister Pierre's initial actions. He has already made it very clear that the trust is going to, in fact, he has reestablished the trust's subvention. I would go further if I were him, and I would have consultation with the trust and to see whether, in fact, that $1 million is adequate for the work of the trust. Because there's a lot of work for them to do. By the way, I have no special interest in the trust. I'm not a director, I'm not a shareholder, I'm nothing in the trust, right? But I'm just looking at it from the point of view of what the important role the trust plays in St. Lucians' lives. I think it should be well financed so that it has a good budget, it can meet all the demands of the work it has to do. and to protect our own patrimony.
I'm sure we'll have another conversation with you, but I wanted to ask you something as one of my final questions, which is a big concern for me, especially as I'm doing the Independence Project. I'm a little concerned that since independence, that the state, the country has been given 1 or 2 island schools. I'm not even sure if they gave 1 this year. Is that fair to our youth, and should our government be investing a little more in educating our young people? Because, for example, we have Taiwan giving us at least 21 scholarships, Cuba gives, everybody gives, but St. Lucia government itself makes available 1 or 2 island schools since independence. Is that fair to the youth?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it says a lot about how you perceive education. One way of looking at this thing, the island scholarship, is to say that it is the big prize that people aspire to. So it's not really. I don't think it's intended to say that we don't want to push education for all, but I think it's intended to say, well, okay, you did so well. We're honoring you in a special way. So we have the island scholar or island scholars, but maybe the time has come when that should be revisited as well, because sometimes we ourselves are too harsh on our own people, and by this I mean, if someone has not done well at one particular level of education, right? In our scenario, it's like, that's it, you're finished. You didn't make it for the CXC, or you didn't make it for the common entrance, you're finished. But people should be given second and third chances, okay? You understand what I mean? So I think maybe the time has come when we should revisit this approach. Of course, by all means, I believe in rewarding excellence. So those who have excelled, they get a special recognition for that. But maybe we should also have scholarship for those who just can't afford to go to university, or the most improved student, or the most promising student. We should probably find other categories and also recognize those. So it's not just a winner takes all scenario, but it becomes a scenario where everybody gets a chance to get a piece of the pie.
And one of the models I think that we can probably learn from Mr. Chastanet, I think it was done by the previous administration, is a dedicated tax. So we had a levy for water to distill the Sir John Compton Dam. We had the airport passenger tax as well. We had the gas tax and so on to fix roads. There should be some kind of an education tax to at least ease it on the governments, but make scholarships available to St. Lucians. Once you meet a particular criteria, then you certainly get through.
And you raise an interesting point there, Bernard, in terms of taxes that are levied and what they are used for. I don't think successive administrations have not actually used the funds that are being taken out from the public for the purpose earmarked. Once it gets into the consolidated fund, it becomes a pool, and then it is utilized for whatever purpose is seen best at the time. But I think it's time there is a little more of a parallel between the tax that you've taken and the intended purpose. So you tax us heavily for the roads, for example. I want to see good roads and infrastructure. You have an education tax of some sort. I want to see good schooling, and I think there should be some kind of parallel between the tax base, what you're taxing, and the intended purpose, right? Of course, there's always going to be general government expenses that may not fall into any of those categories, and you have to also take those into account. But yeah, probably more should be done to ensure that the taxes that are levied, and collected are used for the intended purpose.
And my final question has to do with agriculture, and you did mention the strength of Sir John in agriculture as well as a farmer himself. I remember seeing him on his farm a couple of times. Is it fair for me to say that either administration has not invested seriously in agriculture? Because you could see investments in roads and everything else. I forget the feeder roads and so on, but I'm talking about the development of agriculture. That apart from the abattoir, there hasn't been any serious investment. And when the ECCB says there's the OECS imports $1.6 billion in food, that means there's a pool that we can retain. Should the government now start to seriously look at investing, and not just feed the roads, but investing in the development of agriculture?
Absolutely. And it was something I did a paper which I discussed with the Manufacturers Association, I think it was, and Rotary during the COVID last year. Economic development in the COVID-19 environment. And one of the, again, low-hanging fruits that the government could have pursued during COVID was a much better crafted policy on agriculture, because COVID did not stop us from going on farms. You understand? And I was amazed. I've always been amazed to see how in Antigua, with hardly any land, I spent 5 years in Antigua, I can tell you, arable land is not in abundant supply. Gaston Brown found 100 acres of land, and agriculture, especially short cycle crops, took off in Antigua. I was amazed. You know, Barbados did the same. Dominica has always been very much into the rural, agriculture stuff.
And
St. Vincent.
Before the volcano, yes.
But, you know, St. Lucia, where were we? We were more bent on waiting to see when the hotels would cut back to normal. We were just, our reality was just the wrong reality. You know, so we were, here we are. We knew from day one, we were looking at 2022 before we would have reasonable, normal international travel. But between now and 2022, we had no plan. Agriculture was not on the radar. It was just not prioritized. So I think we got that fundamentally wrong as well in terms of agriculture policy. And it's not surprising for me why, you know, the people did not approve of this government's record, because those were low-hanging fruits. Short cycle crops, get into your backyard, plant your lettuce and your celery.
Shovel ready. Nothing more shovel ready than an agricultural project. The shovel is there.
Exactly. You know. So why we didn't do it, I have no idea. I have no idea, and I think it's regrettable. But you are right. Agriculture has to focus strongly in our policies, and even if we have a tourism kind of centric model, even if we retain the tourism centric model, the tourists eat food. But we have done the wrong thing over the years. You know, we've always said we must get the tourists the food that they consume in their home markets when they come to our local market. Why? You know?
Because the 7 crops kind of reflected that.
I have traveled the world. I have resided on every continent in the world. Asia, Europe, Africa. When I say reside, I've spent more than a year, you know, residing there. Europe and the Pacific. And for me, when I fly anywhere, I get to a particular country, I personally want to savor the local cuisine. What is uniquely that country? I think most tourists actually looking for that. They're not looking for the Burger King. We will never do a burger the same way the Americans will do it somewhere in Kentucky or wherever it is. So why do we want to sell them the things that they know better than us? We should be selling them the things that we know are really uniquely us, okay? So I have always questioned that model of tourism where we want to just basically bring Americans and other foreigners in, put them in a hotel, give them the life they've known all their lives. So like, I'm away from home, but I'm actually at home.
And listen to the music that they're used to hearing.
Bring them in, give them a different experience. You know, take them to the volcano. Make them eat the foods we eat. You know, this should be our tourism thrust.
Yeah, because recently, even when I heard things like village tourism, and I'm saying I have a slight issue with that. If you're telling me, let's develop the community for anybody who comes in, it doesn't have to be tourism related or tourism centric, but just the term sometimes can be a little deceptive in terms of the focus. Because you want a community to develop whatever they have, their arts and craft, beautify the area, make sure that the facilities, everything's working there, but not just for tourists, for the residents themselves. And when the tourists come through,
that's right,
they will enjoy the benefits and so on. So even in the terminologies, I think there's some adjustments we have to do as opposed to making everything tourism-centric. We don't say we don't need tourism, we need tourism.
We do. It's important for our GDP. What we have not gotten right is how you integrate it with the local economy, so that you have a much bigger multiplier effect when the tourists come.
But let me ask you something that may be a bit controversial, and I've been giving it some thought. Should we be working hard, so for example, should Mr. Pierre be working hard on getting another hotel brand, international hotel brand into St. Lucia, or allowing St. Lucians, because I think he's looking at 600 hotel rooms. In his term, Mr. Allen Chastanet was looking at 8,000. But should we have more of the 600 rooms be provided by local? We have Bay Gardens, we have Mr. Chastanet's own property, and that offers excellent service. We have Fondue, and we have so many other hotels locally owned. Should we have more of those locally and incentivize them the same way we incentivize the investors coming in.
Absolutely. We need to do more for the locals. We need to do more. It does not mean that we leave out the foreigners. One of the things I want to see for sure is that if you bring in the foreign hotels, let them come with the capital. Right? This model of foreign investment at Chastanet, I don't know where he got it from, where a foreigner comes to do investment, but he has no money. What kind of a foreign investor is this? This is not defined anywhere in the economic literature. I'm very sorry. That is his economics. It does not exist anywhere. A foreign direct investor is someone who has capital. He has his own money. He comes to implement the project. He puts his capital into the project. And then after he generated his profits, he's able to take some of that and put even into corporate social responsibility projects as well. You know, build schools, do other things for the society. We not supposed to be taking out money given to a foreigner and say we're doing FDI. That is not FDI. So we need the foreign hotels, the foreign brands. I think brands help. They definitely help if people can recognize certain brands, because with the brands, they know there's a certain level of standard and quality.
But if the model
that they're used to.
If the returns that Mr. Chastanet was suggesting, the 80 cents on every dollar going back, is that a good business model that we want to get into?
Absolutely not. We didn't see anything close to that. I don't know how he measured that, but frankly, the tourism model that he was pushing is not bringing any returns to St. Lucia. The money is going back to the foreign establishments, and this is the problem, I don't want to speak too much on the issue, for example, with sandals, but it is evident that a lot of the foreign exchange that is being garnered through St. Lucia and the other OECS countries, where you have a very strong EC dollar, which is the same as having a strong US dollar because of the fixed exchange rate. These hotels use that to shore up the shortfalls where you do not have foreign exchange or you have foreign exchange deficits. So, we really have to revisit those things and see to what extent they benefit St. Lucians and the St. Lucian people, or to what extent that benefit actually goes to the foreigner. The foreigner comes to invest to make profit. And obviously, he will always come only if he can make a profit for himself. But we have to also, as St. Lucians, know what do we get out of it for ourselves. If there is no obvious benefit for us, why do we bring it here?
We have to be job creators, not just job seekers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Claudia, I really appreciate the time you've given us. Like I said, we'll certainly have to have you back here again to have. I know you travel quite a bit, and especially COVID easing up as well, and the vaccine that I suppose, we'll see less and less of you.
Yes,
but we certainly want to have that kind of a discussion, because the objective of this program is not to look at personalities in politics and so on.
Right.
More policies that will help advance St. Lucians in various capacities, and a nice focus for focusing on education, on owning businesses and so on, entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And so we want to focus on that, but we want to engage economists like yourself and political observers like yourself who have a broader vision than we do, a broader take on what's going on to help us advance the conversation, to empower St. Lucians. Because one of the things, and I'll make it very short, that bothers me quite a bit is that we have an excellent cricket facility, but we have no St. Lucians playing for West Indies.
Yes.
So it shows that there's
there's a deficit somewhere there. Yes,
so
yes,
we did
yes.
something right.
Absolutely.
We built a facility. The infrastructure
is there,
but we're not playing in the infrastructure.
Yes.
So that's a slight problem for me. And even the St. Lucia, I think they just call it the St. Lucia Kings now, as it changed from St. Lucia Zooks to Kings.
From the Zooks to the Kings. Yeah. Oh, really? When did that happen?
Like they announced it last night, I think.
Oh, because I saw Zooks playing just yesterday or the day before.
But that's an old tape. That was an old tape.
Oh, the old tape. Okay, okay.
It's now called St. Lucia Kings.
Okay.
But we don't have any players on the St. Lucia Kings.
No, but that's a travesty.
Sam is there as a coach, assistant coach. So those kind of adjustments, I'm hoping that in this new dispensation that we need to get right in terms of, I don't want to use Mr. Trump's putting America first, but we need to put St. Lucians first at some point in time.
A quick observation on that, and I've had that discussion with my colleagues in the UWP and elsewhere before. I think, to be fair, the Labour Party has always had a much stronger hand on sports than Inayaka's party has had.
Well, they built the stadium, man.
They built the stadium
to train cricketers.
And they created, and out of them we saw the Sammy and what's the other guy's name? Charles and others emerge.
Yeah.
And the question we have is, where was the focus in the last 5 years? Did we have any great focus in that area? Who are the next Sammys and the next
Well,
Johnson
we have
Charles.
Sports Academy. There's some young people coming through there as well. So there's
but
something going on. But
we need
as a national policy.
Yes.
Yeah, across all schools.
And shouldn't that have been a bigger focus, right, than the merely trying to get playing fields organized by Lockerbie? We spend all that money in Lockerbie, $40-something million to get Lockerbie to come and give us advice where to put playing fields, etc. Shouldn't the focus be more on trying to develop the people, the resources for the sports? I watched the Olympic Games yesterday, and I've been watching the games. I mean, you see Barbadians, you see other nationals, you see Grenadians. There's no St. Lucian there. I think there was one spot, what was it, swimming? There was a swimming
yes,
event.
We have a young lady, she's back here now, but she's still part. So that leads me to the other thing, Claudius, we might discuss now in next conversation, the rubric that we use to measure progress.
Right.
Like I know we quickly go to visa arrivals, GDP, and things that we can't really associate it with.
Right.
But we look at what we spoke about earlier, increasing the number of island calls from 1 to 10 in the first 2 years and up, creating more avenues for St. Lucian sports persons and coaches to get trained to take us to the next level.
Right.
So if this year we have 0 players on the St. Lucia Kings, next year we should have at least 2. And increase it and use that as a measurement guide as opposed to GDP and those figures that most of us can relate to.
Yes, you're right. I mean, and here's the thing. I mean, as an economist, I'm one of those who use the numbers a lot, the GDP per capita and GDP, etc. And they're nice numbers to use, but our total factor productivity, our total growth, our total overall well-being as St. Lucians. These are also good factors, good indicators of whether we're going forward or not.
Yes.
The UN came out with the HDI several years ago, which tries to embody so many other measures, not just the GDP per capita, but other, the social indicators as well, healthcare quality and other things as well. I think there is a need for us to focus more because on right now our tourism measurement, our progress in the tourism sector is measured almost exclusively by visitor arrivals. So your arrivals go up by 20%. Oh, we're doing well.
Yes.
Actually, and a lot of those numbers are so misleading because, especially if it is like cruise type tourism, it doesn't really mean anything. The cruise ships arrive. They have a whole bunch of all-inclusive arrangements on board. The guests remain on the cruise ship. You look at St. Lucia, they enjoy our whatever, and they go back. So sometimes, and literally, not $1 is spent by some of these people in St. Lucia, except for whatever head tax that is levied. So we should focus on other measurements. Look at how many small businesses are now thriving as a result of the tourism sector. Look at how many people are employed in tourism type activities. Try and work out a median or mean income. In these other indicators might give us a better sense of how well we are doing. And not just visa arrivals, which is what we use, and we trump a lot and say, oh, we have the arrivals are going up, but we don't see it in our pockets.
I think that there's something I was reading about the happy index, some countries, the happiest countries in the world, and so on.
Right,
if you look at quality of life and so on.
Yes.
I think to me that's a better indicator of how well we're doing, as opposed to how many hotels we have filled and everything else. And if the people are not, if we still have to give an increasing number of Christmas hampers, there's an issue. The more hampers you give, the bigger the issue.
The bigger the issue.
But Claudia, Dr. Preville, it's certainly good to have you here.
Certainly.
We certainly hope to have another continued conversation with you, and all the best with your ebook is coming out when?
I'm looking at the 8th of this month.
Oh, that's soon, excellent.
Yeah, August 8th.
So how can we find it? We need to purchase it, as you said.
Yes, I will send the details for you. I'm looking for if an entity based in Antigua.
Okay.
They facilitate online payments, so you can go to the merchant store and you can purchase, and the book is available to you within a matter of a few hours.
Okay, cool.
So you download as an ebook and you can access it and so on.
So anybody's interested, especially the members of the UWP who want to know what happened, they should read this ebook.
They should read the ebook.
Who are interested in politics.
Yes, indeed. I think it's something that every citizen should actually read because the information is presented there in a very cogent, very lucid way, factual as well. Of course, I have put in some cases, I've put in my own assessment because it's my own assessment of what happened. But my assessment is based on actual data. So the data are there from places like the Economic and Social Review, the CSO's websites, in the case of elections themselves, electoral.gov.lc, right? And also my other partners who I collaborate with, like Mr. St. Catherine and others, who do work in the area. So the data are very reliable data, and I think they give a very good assessment of what transpired.
So we were speaking with Dr. Claudius Preville of the Preville and Associates Consulting Group. We'd like to wish you all the best and look forward to having further conversations with you again.
Thank you so much, Bernard.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay.